by them. Jitaha, conquered. Sargaha, birth and death. Esham, of those. Samye, in equanimity. Sthitam, so situated. Manaha, mind. Nirdosham, flawless. He, certainly. Samam, in equanimity. Brahma, the supreme. Tasmat, therefore. Brahmani, in the supreme. Te, they. Sitaha, are situated. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They are flawless like Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahman. Translation with repetition. Those whose minds are established in sameness and equanimity have already conquered the conditions of birth and death. They are flawless like Brahman, and thus they are already situated in Brahman. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Equanimity of mind, as mentioned above, is the sign of self-realization. Those who have actually attained to such a stage should be considered to have conquered material conditions, specifically birth and death. As long as one identifies with this body, he is considered a conditioned soul. But as soon as he is elevated to the stage of equanimity through realization of self, he is liberated from conditional life. In other words, he is no longer subject to take birth in the material world, but can enter into the spiritual sky after his death. The Lord is flawless because he is without attraction or hatred. Similarly, when a living entity is without attraction or hatred, he also becomes flawless and eligible to enter into the spiritual sky. Such persons are to be considered already liberated, and their symptoms are described below. Thus ends the Transcendental Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnanatimmirandasya Gnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Hare Krishna everyone. Welcome to Gita Life series, weekly discussions on Bhagavad Gita as it is. So today we are discussing from chapter 5, Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness, and text 19. So in this verse, it is being mentioned, Iheva ter jitaha sargo. So jitaha means he is able to conquer. And when is he able to conquer? Iha, in this life. In this very life, one is able to conquer sargaha. Prabhupada is translating the word sargaha here as birth and death. So in this very life, one can conquer the conditions or the cycle of birth and death. But who are those in this life they can conquer? That is being mentioned as Esham Samye Sthitam Manaha. So of those who are able to keep their mind in samye, in equanimity, whose mind is situated in sameness and in equanimity, those people are able to conquer over birth and death in this very life. And people who are able to acquire this state of having their mind in equanimity and sameness, they also become nirdosham. They become dosham, fault. Nirdosham means without fault. So they become flawless. And like he samam brahma, just like Lord is flawless, similarly the living entity, when he is self-realized, when his mind is situated in equanimity and sameness, he is able to he is able to become flawless like the Brahman, and one is said to be situated, tasmat, therefore, sthitaha, te sthitaha, sthitaha, they are situated in Brahmani, in the transcendence or in the Brahman. So this verse is talking about the condition or the state by which one can conquer over the cycle of birth and death. And that is the one who has conquered or one who has sthitam, samya sthitam manaha. So one whose mind is in equanimity and sameness is able to conquer the conditions of birth and death. So before we go further into this description of this verse, so last week, in the last class, the beautiful verse, Vidya Vinaya Sampanne, Brahmane Gavi Hastini, Shuni Chaiva Swapakyacha, Panditaha Samadarshinaha. So this beautiful verse was described where the Panditaha, so Panditaha means one who is filled with transcendental knowledge, who is filled with spiritual knowledge. So one who has acquired this, who is advanced in spiritual knowledge and who is situated in transcendental position, what is his vision? So that was mentioned here in the last verse, where his vision is that equalness to all living entities. Now, whether one is Brahmana or Gavi, that is cow, Hastini, the elephant, Shuni, the dog, or Swabake, the dog eater. So that person who is learned, Pandita, he does not distinguish. He sees with equal vision all these different types of living entities. And why is that? Because that Panditaha is not seeing the outer dress or the outer activities of the living entity. Rather, with the transcendental position in which one is situated, the Panditaha, he is able to see the transcendental position of each living entity. And he's also able to see the transcendental position of the Supreme Lord as Paramatma, who is situated in everyone's heart. And because of that transcendental vision, he is able to see equality in different living entities. So therefore, he does not distinguish whether, so a person who is situated in Krishna consciousness or in spiritual knowledge, he does not distinguish anyone based upon one's caste, creed, nationality, gender. So he does not see this, but rather he sees the transcendental position of each living entities. And continuing from that, from today, there is another section of verses are describing qualities of one situated in transcendental position. So there are further qualities. Prabhupada mentions, as we see in the last line of this purport, that the symptoms of a liberated persons are described below. So starting here, this is kind of a beginning, and starting the next verse, there is more description about one who is liberated or one who is situated in transcendental position. And in today's verse, how one can conquer over. So just like sometimes people say, oh, I'm very much elevated in spiritual life. I know Brahman. But it is not so simple that anyone can claim anything. Prabhupada always says that if you say you're a very, very rich man, and let's say if you're working as a laborer, that does not qualify that you are actually a rich man. If you are actually a rich man, and you must be able to show by your activities of how you're spending money, how you're leading your life. So there has to be symptoms associated with every fact or every quality that is being mentioned. So similarly, Prabhupada says that if one is saying that, oh, I am able to conquer birth and death, then Prabhupada says that he must demonstrate certain symptoms. And that is being mentioned starting here. So the one of the most important symptom is that how is his mind? So the nature of the mind, what is the quality of one's mind is a very important criteria to determine what is his status in conquering the condition of birth and death. So before we go further in understanding the quality or the nature of the mind in conquering conditions of birth and death, let us try to understand a little more about why is it important to talk about this problem called conquering the conditions of birth and death. So because there are so many problems that we are already encountering in life, so why should we bother about the condition of birth and death? So usually people want to conquer some higher status of life by acquiring more money, by acquiring another company, by acquiring another position in some institution or some other degree. So these are the different things people want to conquer or people want to acquire. But rarely people think about this problem of why is it important to conquer the conditions of birth and death. So what is the conditions of birth and death? We will describe a little later, but it is important to understand that in a certain state of being, in a certain conditions of life, one can conquer this, and in other conditions of life, one cannot conquer birth and death. So that is what this verse is talking about, the condition of the mind. In what condition, when it is present, one can conquer the birth and death. So it is important to recognize that in the ancient Vedic civilization, this was a common theme for all the people in the kingdom. All the knowledgeable men, they were all trying to do this one thing, that is to conquer our birth and death. Knowledge means that their advancement of knowledge means how much they are able to conquer these conditions of birth and death. That is what the Vedic civilization is. Unfortunately, in the modern civilization, the concept of conquering birth and death is completely forgotten. The conception of conquering another kingdom, conquering with some advancement, some space, some planet, going to some other place and establishing our some sort of a monopoly and trying to rule that place. These are the kinds of things people are trying to conquer over. But unfortunately, they do not realize that in this process, they're only getting more and more entangled. They are not able to really solve. Rather, in fact, Srila Prabhupada mentions in another place that in fact, with modern civilization, they're only advancing their closeness to death. Prabhupada gives the example of atomic bomb. Prabhupada says, what is this atomic bomb? Atomic bomb means mass destruction. So they're using all this advancement of science to only destroy and bring death a lot more closer. And also I was just saying yesterday, I received an email where they were mentioning about some of the recent discussions on climate change. And there was one paper which was written by 234 people. And all 234 people agreed that by the advancement of this fossil fuels and the petrol and other kinds of vehicular transportation technology, the chances of Earth being closer to mass destruction is becoming more and more possible because of this advancement in technology. So it is important to recognize that there needs to be a shift in understanding between what is advancement. Let's try to understand that a little more deeply from this example of Vishwamitra Muni coming to Dasharatha Maharaj and asking him to send Lord Rama and Lakshmana with him to fight with the demons. So as we know, the Munis, the great sages, they used to live in forests, and the kings would live in the palaces. And although the Munis, they were all greatly advanced sages, but they wouldn't fight with the demons. Rather, they would call upon the kings or his army to fight. In this case, Vishwamitra Muni comes and asks the Maharaj Dasharatha to send his two sons. And it was said that the kings in the Vedic time, they would not only take care of the normal kingdom, but they would also take care of the forest and all the living entities in the forest. So sages being the most important and respected individuals in the kingdom, Dasharatha Maharaj immediately agrees to send Lord Rama and Lakshmana. But before this request and the fulfillment of this request, Dasharatha Maharaj asked Vishwamitra Muni a very important question. And he asks him, firstly, he welcomes Vishwamitra Muni, and then he says, ahishtam yat punarjanma jayaya. So, as soon as Vishwamitra Muni entered into the palace, Maharaj Dasharatha goes and welcomes him and treats him very nicely. And then he immediately asks with a very wonderful question. He says, ahishtam yat punarjanma jayaya. So he's inquiring from Vishwamitra Muni that how is your journey in conquering birth and death? Punarjanma jayaya. How are you doing in this direction? So usually when we meet people, we say, how are you? What are you doing? How are your other family members? And so on and so forth. But here, when two great transcendentalists, spiritualists meet, they're asking about how is your process? How are you doing in terms of conquering birth and death? Because they realize that this is the most important aspect of human life. So in other species, lower species of life, there are 84 lakh species of lives. Either one is a demigod in the heavenly planet, or one is a small ant. Each of these living entities within this material world is undergoing these four problems of Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi. So in another place, I think it is mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, where it is said that one is considered to be greatly fortunate if one is human being. One is considered even more great fortunate if one knows the four problems of life, that is Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi. Because to know these problems as problems is very, very difficult. Because it eludes us from thinking that this is the real problem that we need to solve. Because this is not in our conception of life right now, there are so many other problems we are all engrossed with. Thinking that these problems by solving, I'll become happy, I'll lead my life truly. And further, it is mentioned in that purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions that even more fortunate are those people who try to solve the problems of birth, death, and old age and disease. And it goes on further to say that those people are even more fortunate who understand the glories of Srimad Bhagavatam and engage in hearing and reading Srimad Bhagavatam. So the whole Vedic literatures are meant to help one advance in spiritual knowledge to overcome this prime important problem of life, which is Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi. And this is how the spiritualists think. This is how they converse to understand how is it happening. Whereas, as I briefly mentioned earlier, in the current civilization, the all understanding of advancement is to exploit material resources, is to just accumulate more and more material resources. But unfortunately, the living entity is not able to recognize that by accumulating, I'm not going to carry anything. It's rather binding me so much in this material world that I'm not able to realize my true happiness, my true self. Rather, it is burdening me in so many different ways. On the other hand, according to Vedic knowledge, the real knowledge means how much one is able to free oneself from all kinds of material attachments. Freedom from all kinds of material attachment is actually advancement in real life. That is when one can actually go towards one's true self of understanding that I'm not this body. My business is nothing to do with this material world. My business is to actually be my constitutional position to serve the Supreme Lord. And that advancement is considered to be actual advancement. So it is very important that as we do our day-to-day activities, as we go forward in our life, we need to always measure our advancement in terms of, am I coming to my real constitutional position? Am I able to understand that, am I acquiring this vision of transcendental knowledge? Am I situated in transcendental position? Am I trying to act according to that knowledge of transcendental knowledge? So if we are not doing, that means we are not actually advancing according to Vedic civilization. Because if we do not advance in this direction, we cannot come out of the problem of the birth and death. So this is a very important instructive lesson of Dashrath Maharaj and Vishwamitra Muni as how one should look at this problem of birth and death and the significance to conquer this. Furthermore, what is the cause for this repeated cycle of birth and death? Why are we stuck in this cycle of birth and death? No one wants death. Even a man who is dying of various diseases, he is trying to see how can I get another medicine? Can I go another round of chemo? Can I undergo some other treatment? Can people experiment something with me? So everyone wants to avoid death. There is no one in this world who wants death. But still, one is not able to recognize that what is the real cause because of which I'm being put in such a situation where I'm getting something which I do not want. And this is very well explained in Bhagavad Gita. It says, Ichha dvesha samuthena dvandva mohena bharata sarva bhutani sammoham sarge yanti parantapa. So this verse from 7th chapter, Knowledge of the Absolute, 27th verse, is describing the real cause for the living entity to be situated in a situation where he is experiencing this birth, death, old age, and disease. And it is being explained here is that Ichha and Dvesha. So it is because of these two qualities, that is the desire and hate. So the living entity, when he develops certain kinds of desires, so I want to lord over material world, or he develops some sort of hate towards serving the Supreme Lord. When one is submerged in these dualities of desire and hate, he forgets one's original position of the transcendental position in which one is supposed to serve the Supreme Lord, the transcendental position in which one is supposed to subordinate the Supreme Lord. Rather, because of these dualities, one is born into delusion. One is deluded because of this material energy, and the dualities come into life. What is right, what is not right, they do not know. And Srila Prabhupada explains this further very beautifully in the purport, where Prabhupada says, due to desire and hate, the ignorant person wants to become one with the Supreme Lord and envies Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The living entity, because of this little free will, the freedom that the living entity has got, he desires, because of ignorance, to lord over material nature, to become one with the Supreme Lord. The living entity can never become one with the Supreme Lord. The living entity is prone to be illusioned, whereas Supreme Lord is never prone to be illusioned. If Supreme Lord also becomes illusion, how can we call him Supreme Person? So it is very important to recognize that we as a tiny living entity are never equal with the Supreme Lord. And therefore this false ignorance or false desire to become one with the Supreme Lord, one should give it up. And Prabhupada says here that the pure devotees who are not so deluded or contaminated by desire and hate can understand that Lord Krishna appears by his internal potencies, but those who are deluded by duality and nations think that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is created by material energies. This is their misfortune. So by this dualities, one gets confused to understand one's own position and also the position of the Lord. The position of the Lord is unique, Atma Maya. He appears by his own internal potencies. His activities are all done under his internal potencies. They are not same as the way we act in the presence of material energies, driven by material energies. So this state of not able to recognize the true position of the Lord, true position of ourselves, and what we should act, there are certain symptoms that Prabhupada is mentioning further, that such deluded persons symptomatically dwell in dualities of dishonor and honor, misery and happiness, woman and man, good and bad, pleasure and pain, etc. Thinking, this is my wife, this is my house, I'm the master of this house, I'm the husband of this wife. These are the dualities of delusion. Those who are so deluded by dualities are completely foolish and therefore cannot understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in the material world, because of this covering, this delusion and illusion, one is thinking, oh, this is my house, this is my permanent location, and I am the owner of this house, I am the controller of this house. Actually, we are not the real proprietor of anything. But because of this false conceptions of life, the beginning of desire and hate, we are deluded by different ways. And Prabhupada is giving different symptoms. Sometimes we are thinking we are honored, sometimes we are thinking we are dishonored, sometimes misery is coming, sometimes happiness is coming. But the actual living entity is beyond all this material circumstantial gain and loss. But that cannot be understood in the state of delusion. And such persons who are deluded cannot also understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Laksham Sarva Bhutanam. The Supreme Lord, Maya Javani Kachanam, he's covered, he's not prone to be known to everyone. He reserves that right to whom he should be revealing as who he is. And that cannot be understood by people who are deluded and who are driven by this desire and hate. And it is also mentioned a couple of verses before as the nature of the Lord. Vaishamya nairgrinye na sapekshatvat tatha hi darshayati. The Lord neither hates nor likes anyone, though he appears to be. So this is a Vedanta Sutra which is mentioning that the Lord never hates anyone nor likes anyone, though he appears to. So the equality of the Lord is mentioned in that Vedanta Sutra. And just to further go, there is another beautiful prayer by Prahlad Maharaj to Narasimhadev, which was recently sung very beautifully for Narasimha Jayanti. In that purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that every living entity within this material world has a strong desire to enjoy matter to his fullest satisfaction. For this purpose, the conditioned soul must accept one body after another, and thus his strongly fixed fruitive desires continue. One cannot stop the repetition of birth and death without being completely desireless. So this is another very important point. So the Ichha and Dvesha. So what is this all about? It is Ichha is to enjoy, desire is to enjoy the matter to the fullest, and hate is to that which stops one from enjoying matter. So because there is an ingrained tendency which is deeply ingrained that I should enjoy matter. I am the master, I am the proprietor, I am the enjoyer. I am the friend of all living entities. So because of this false desire that I should enjoy, I should control, because of this reason, because of this strong desire, the living entity is given one body after another body of another body, so that he can enjoy these fruitive desires that one is developing. So unless one does not stop this material attachment and these material desires, unless one does not become pure in his heart, in his desires, one cannot stop the cycle of birth and death. So this purification of desires, purification of intelligence, purification of one's actions, purification of one's words, these are all very, very important. And in fact, the how to purify one's desire is very beautifully mentioned here by Srila Rupa Goswami, also defining as what is bhakti. Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadi anavritam anukulyena krishnanushilanam bhaktiruttama. So one should render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably and without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. That is called pure devotional service. So here one should not desire. So when one is rendering service to the Supreme Lord, one should do it in a way which is anukulyena, which is favorable to the service of the Lord, and without any desire for jnana or karma, any expectation that I should get something back in return. Because I'm serving the Lord, I should be given so and so position in the institution, or I should get so and so recognition. No. Neither some speculation one should be doing while doing devotional service. No. This is not considered to be pure devotional service. So in order to really purify our desires, if we just simply understand the knowledge given by Srila Prabhupada and try to serve the Srila Prabhupada and Supreme Lord Shri Krishna in the favorable way, without any this expectation, then we will become purified. Then our desires, the Lord who is present as within our heart, helps us to overcome the unwanted desires in our heart. The inauspiciousness, abhadra. So there is so much of abhadra in our heart. The abhadra Prabhupada defines as the eagerness to enjoy material matter. So that eagerness which is so much present, that can be cleansed by rendering devotional service, by rendering pure devotional service. Lord who is present within our heart as Suhradam Sarvabhutanam, he immediately cleanses from the unwanted desires in our heart. Only then we can stop this cause for repeated cycle of birth. Furthermore, as we see in this verse, there is description of the nature of the mind. So as we see, Prabhupada mentions that, in fact, Lord Krishna is saying that once one's mind is established in sameness and equanimity. So mind, the nature of the mind is so fickle. It is always in duality. It's always in unequilibrium state, non-equilibrium state. Sometimes it is happy, sometimes sad, sometimes desiring something, sometimes want to enjoy this, sometimes it wants to give it. Bhoga and Tyaga. So this nature of the mind is described as flickering. Sometimes it accepts something and immediately it rejects the same thing. So sometimes we want to do this, sometimes the very same thing we say we don't want to do it. This accepting and rejecting is the process of the mind in contact with the 5 objects of sense gratification: form, taste, smell, sound, and touch. In its speculative way, the mind comes in touch with the objects of sense gratification, and when the living entity desires a particular type of body, he gets it. Therefore, the body is an offering by the laws of material nature. The living entity accepts a body and comes out again into the material world to enjoy or suffer according to the construction of the body. Unless we have a particular type of body, we cannot enjoy or suffer according to our mental proclivities inherited from the previous life. A particular type of body is actually offered to us according to our mental condition at the time of death. So this last sentence is very, very important for us to recognize. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tajate ante kalevaram. So as what is our state of mind at the time of death? According to that, we get another kind of body in the next life. So because we have certain kinds of desires to enjoy some way, or we hate some things, that is especially to serve the Supreme Lord or envy him as the Supreme Lord. Therefore, in order to facilitate for us to enjoy matter based upon our proclivities that we have developed throughout our life, we get another body. And this is all given by the laws of material nature. So it is so important for us to fix our mind in such a way that at the time of death, our mind is not thinking of enjoying, desiring, or hating anything material. Rather, it must be fixed on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, in fact, a wonderful example of how one should fix one's mind can be seen from Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlad Maharaj was troubled tremendously by his father. He was putting him in various kinds of difficult situations, always troubling. But because Prahlad Maharaj was able to always do smarana, he's known of Navavida Bhakti, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Vishnu Smaranam. So Prahlad Maharaj is known for smaranam, always remembering the Lord. So because his mind was totally absorbed in remembering the glories of the Lord, he was unaffected, even though he was put in different kinds of turbulent situations. So this mind, when it is engaged in the thought of the Lord, only then it can free from the effects of its coming in contact with the sense objects, with the circumstantial pleasure, pain, happiness, sadness. So mind immediately tries to react. And especially the mind has a tendency to lord over the phenomenal world. It tries to imagine or thinks that this temporary phenomenal world is everything. And it wants to act only in relationship to with this. In that situation, one cannot come to the platform of bringing mind to equanimity, or to see with sameness everything, a rich man, a poor man, a stone, a pebble, as we will see in the future, in the next few slides, that actually one who is in transcendental position, he finds sameness because he sees everything in Krishna consciousness. Everything he sees in relation to the Supreme Lord. And therefore, he is not affected by the circumstantial ups and downs. So without our training our mental condition, without fixing our mind in remembering Krishna, fixing our mind at the lotus feet of Krishna, it is not possible for us to overcome that desire and hate. The tendency to control and enjoy independently, we cannot overcome. So in order to understand this further as what is this equanimity of mind, it is in multiple places the word equanimity has been described, and let us try to understand a little more about what this equanimity of mind is and how one can achieve that. So in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the verses 4 and 5, it is mentioned. So here the Lord is describing about various qualities and how they were all created by him. So in this, the word, one word is samatha. So equanimity. Prabhupada refers that equanimity refers to freedom from attachment to aversion. So to be very much attached or to be very much detached is not the best. So sometimes you become too attached with something, sometimes you become too detached. This is not the best way. Rather, what is the way? This material world should be accepted without attachment or aversion. So neither to feel something too much for, neither to hate something too much for. But rather, what is that way one should execute or look at this world? Which is favorable for prosecuting Krishna consciousness should be accepted. And that is, which is unfavorable should be rejected. So this thinking, when the mind is fixed in seeing things, oh, this is favorable to serve the Lord, so I accept it. If it is not favorable, I reject it. Very simple formula. If one can simply follow this simple principle of taking things, whatever, or acting in those actions which only help or in prosecuting one's devotional service, service to the Supreme Lord, or in progressing in spiritual knowledge, if one does that and rejects everything else, one can remain equanimous. A person in Krishna consciousness is nothing to reject and nothing to accept unless it is useful in the prosecution of Krishna consciousness. So we can give up so many unwanted things in our life simply by becoming conscious of this fact of Anukulyasya Sankalpa Pratikulyasya Varjanam. So just by having this principle in mind, that is it favorable, I take it. If it is not, I stop it. So if with this knowledge, if with this intelligence, if we act, we make so much advancement in Krishna consciousness in spiritual life, and we can become freed from attachment and aversion to material things. So this attachment and aversion, they both bring miseries to one's life. Further, the equanimity is also defined in, I think this is from 6th chapter, where it is being said, Suhran mitrari udasina madhyastha dvesha bandhusu sadhushu apicha papeshu samabuddhir vishishyate. So it is being said, a person is said to be still further advanced when he regards all, the honest well-wisher, friends and enemies, the envious, the pious, the sinner, and those who are indifferent and impartial with an equal mind. So this is mentioned in the 6th chapter, where how does a person looks at different things. So only when one has got this transcendental vision, this ability to see that everything is connected to the Lord and everything is to be engaged in the service of the Lord, until unless one does not see with that vision, one cannot have this equanimity of mind. One always likes to hate someone, whoever is stopping one's enjoyment materially. And one tries to develop attachment, thinking that this person is of my family, so I will have a strong attachment for this person. But actually, those both are not, one who is in that kind of thinking is not considered to be actually advanced. So as we see in this verse, also Srila Prabhupada mentions that the person who is in, whose mind is in sameness, or who is situated in sameness of mind or equanimity, is considered to be that state is considered to be a state of self-realization. Similarly, a verse previous to this says that a person who is situated in self-realization is called a yogi when he is fully satisfied by the virtue of acquired knowledge and realization. Such a person is situated in transcendence and is self-controlled. He sees everything, whether it be pebbles, stones, or gold, as the same. So this is only by this transcendental knowledge, or by being self-controlled, by being in self-realization, one can see this so-called seemingly different things with equal vision, or as the same. Why? Because he is not driven by this mundane scholarship or speculation, where one can see that there is some different value in terms of gold, pebble, and so on and so forth. But in terms of the spiritual knowledge, anything in the material world is not that he is trying to acquire. Rather, his goal is to situate himself in the activities of spiritual life, which would take him back to the spiritual world. And because of that knowledge and that vision, he is not worried about other things. Furthermore, there is one more place where there is a beautiful description of what is equanimity means. So Prabhupada in another place in 13th chapter, in fact 14th chapter, it is mentioned that one is considered to be equanimous in mind when one is able to overcome the influence of three modes of material nature. In fact, towards the end of chapter 14, that is three modes of material nature, Krishna addresses three questions asked by Arjuna. And in this indicates that Lord Krishna indicates, this is verse number 22 to 25. There, Lord Krishna says that he who does not hate illumination, attachment, and delusion when they are present, nor longs for them when they disappear, who is situated in like one unconcerned, being situated beyond these material reactions of the modes of nature, who remains firm, knowing that the modes alone are active, who regards alike pleasure and pain, and looks on a clod, a stone, a piece of gold with an equal eye, who is wise and holds praise and blame to be the same, who is unchanged in honor and dishonor, who treats friend and foe alike, who has abandoned all fruitive undertakings. Such a man is said to have transcended the modes of material nature. So, as we also see that until unless one is not out of the conception of the body, as Prabhupada was also mentioning in this, that as long as one is in the bodily concept of life, one is conditioned soul. So in the conditioned state of being, one cannot have this conception of treating the foe and the friend alike, to see gold, stone with an equal vision. But only when one is elevated to the spiritual platform, and one knows one's activities are to be only bent in relationship to the Supreme Lord, and those are the only things which are of primary importance for him, then he is freed from so many misconceptions of conditioned life. And therefore, only it is important to recognize, until unless we do not overcome these modes of material nature by performing devotional service, we are always stuck up in this Ichha Dvesha. So just to conclude, as we see in the previous verses, by transcendental knowledge and rendering devotional service, one can come to the state of being equanimous and develop this transcendental vision by which one can see things in sameness with the spiritual vision. And when one is able to elevate oneself with this knowledge and devotional service, one can develop a mind which is favorable to conquer the conditions of birth and death. And then one becomes flawless. Aham Brahmasmi, I'm Brahman, I'm part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. My activities are meant to be spiritual, and I'm subordinate to the Supreme Lord, Shri Krishna. So these understandings, when come into the living entity, then he also becomes flawless in terms of he's no more conditioned, but rather liberated to perform his real constitutional activities. So with that, I'll stop here and see if there are any questions or comments. Kiri Garu, how are you?
I'm sorry, Prabhu, you were asking me?
Yes, I was asking, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you very much.
Yes, did you learn something today? Did you find anything interesting?
No, I did though, in terms of, I know we all reach for this equanimous state. I know it's not easy to get to, but I think you explained it well in terms of all the places in Bhagavad Gita, this concept is quoted, right? Not just in the chapter 5 where we are, but in other chapters as well. So thank you.
Okay. Okay, if there are no questions, we'll start in another 3 minutes, our journey to Janmashtami activity. And thank you all for joining. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Grandhiraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanand. Hari Hari.
Thank you, Panduranga, for that wonderful class. Should ask questions if they don't have questions.
Yes.
Should form some questions and ask. Okay, you want to ask?
Prabhu, can you say that again? Sorry.
I'm saying if they don't have questions, you should ask questions.
Oh, okay, yes. Bhagavad Tattva, Prabhu. Bhagavad Tattva, Prabhu, are you there?
Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu.
What is the verse trying to tell? Which story was mentioned, Prabhu, today?
Prabhu, I joined it, Prabhu. I
Yeah.
couldn't,
Anything that you heard?
Prabhu, I couldn't hear today class, Prabhu.
Okay. Nidhi Priya Mataji.
Talked about Prithu Maharaj, how he wanted to have a completely different approach for having advancement of civilization to break from the previous king, King Vena, who had destroyed the civilization.
So, Prabhu,
yeah.
you spoke about the detachment and equanimity, and somebody, in order not to have a birth again, so they actually need to see everything with equal vision. So consider a gold or a diamond or a stone with an equal vision. And you also narrated the story of Dashrad Maharaj. So when Vishwamitra comes to see him, he actually asks him how his the practice of equanimity is going on, rather than how he's actually doing, or how his detachment from the material things is going on.
Actually, they said Ahishtam yat punar janma jayaya. So how is the business of conquering the birth
Yes,
and death
Prabhu.
going on?
Sorry, Prabhu, I couldn't explain it clearly.
Okay, no problem. I think others are joining, so let's stop here.
No, ask one more question.
Okay. What is the cause for one's coming to the material world? Which verse was quoted? Jagannath Tirtha Prabhu?
So in the 7th chapter, the verse I forget.
Yam yam vapi smaran.
Oh no. Ichadesha. Ichadesha. Dvandva Bharata.
Wait, Balram. Who can
Ichha
complete that verse?
Ichha dvesha samuthena.
Okay.
Hina Bharata.
Stop. Who else can complete that verse? Sukirti Keshav Prabhu.
I do know only those first two lines, Prabhu, not the last two.
Can you repeat those two lines?
Ichha dvesha samuttena dvanda mohena bharata.
Beautiful. Okay. Who will complete the last two lines? Chinmay. Vishnu Chitta Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
What are the last two lines of this verse? Bhagavad Gita Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
What are the last two lines?
So Ichha Dvesha Samuttena Dvandva
Sarva
Mohena Bharata Sarva Sarva Bhutani Samoham.
Yes, you're right. Can you explain what is the verse?
Ichha Dvesha Samoham. Ichha is desire. Dvesha is hate, and Samoha. Samoha is come to being.
Prabhu, I can say.
Yes, go ahead, Vishnu.
Prabhu, we come with an illusion. We don't know the reality, and we are our mind is filled with that. We like something, we don't like something, and it's we desire something and we have ichha for it, and then we have dvesh for it, and then we hate for it. So our mind is just filled with these things. That's how we are deluded as we are born.
Okay, partially correct, but the concept is right. Anyways, it's 8:34. So continuing with what the Bhagavad Gita discussion we had so far, in the beautiful words which Krishna says, unfortunately, these are not just verses to be memorized, these are verses to be understood. And sadly, we don't know even the verse. These are very, very important verses. These are very cardinal verses, fundamental verses. People ask, why does the Lord create the material world? If the material world is all this bad that you are saying, why was it created at the first instance? The answer is given by the Lord in this particular verse, which we should at least know. Ichha dvesha samuttena dvanda mohena bharata sammoham sarva bhutani sarge yanti paranta. One is the desire to be independent of Krishna, and the other is being envious of Krishna as to why he should be the only enjoyer. That the Lord puts us in this illusion, sammoham, bewilderment, sargayanti, and we are put into this material world where we are given the tiny independence to become independent enjoyer, and to become envious of Krishna and to do whatever we are doing. So the root cause of our material existence is our desire to be independent and our envious nature towards Krishna. Unfortunately, we do many things just for the sake of doing. Saturday Bhagavad Gita class joining also becomes a formality. Not just Saturday evening, I'm saying in general. Somebody is telling something, I'm so advanced and elevated that I can continue doing my work, and at the same time, here something is going on. Ichha, dvesha, attachment, aversion. Unfortunately, we don't pay attention. And that's the reason our existence gets elongated in this material world. One very beautiful point which you mentioned from the purport of 10.45, which says the definition of samatha. And there it is mentioned, how do we come out of this mind's business of becoming attached and detached? Some things we like, so we get attached. Some things we don't like, we get detached. Simple thing is, anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjana. Material matter per se doesn't have anything that can attract or repel us. Right? Only if the matter is being used in Krishna's service, let me take that. If the matter is not used, pratikulyasya varjana. If it is not favorable for my Krishna consciousness, let me not use that. It's a very important principle, very nice principle. Sometimes people get paranoid, and sometimes they have this attack. Oh, material world is all bad. Let's all shun this. Let's all become completely renounced, and that doesn't work. Or sometimes they become too attached. Only material things look positive. So matter per se is matter. It is dead. It is not sentient. But as long as we are able to use it for Krishna's service, that is favorable. That is Krishna consciousness. That is the real. The devotee doesn't have any attachment or aversion, but he sees if there is a utility of that for Krishna service. Today we have a wonderful activity where we will see a simple material thing can become how it can become transcendental when it is used in Krishna service. And to help us explain what the activity is, I would like to call upon Palini Mataji. You can all say a loud Haribol on mute for Mataji. Haribol! Over to you, Mataji.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna, everybody.
Hare Krishna.
Sorry about the background noise. So, Madhav.